Hello again. In this episode, we will talk about the power of storytelling in coaching. Yes, in my opinion, a life coach, a communicator, or anyone who wants to improve themselves in any area absolutely must know how to tell a good story. Because sometimes this could be a moment, sometimes a joke, or sometimes a piece of life advice. A very important topic. That's why I will explain this lesson in detail. I will ask you to focus very well on this lesson. In this lesson, I will tell you some stories. I will talk about the meanings of those stories. Maybe you can also use these stories in your own journey with your own clients, or who knows, you can even use them when giving a speech in the business world. But this is something that very few people have in Turkey. It's the same in the world as well. America is a bit better than us in this regard, because they have a bit of a culture for it. Speaking in front of an audience, telling stories, this is called storytelling. But in Turkey, this skill is really very rare. If you become a good storyteller, you can reach everyone. Being a good storyteller is a very important and valuable thing. For example, let's start with an example now. Let's say you got up and said, "So, friends, what should we do to live a good life? 1 you should be flexible. 2 you should be patient. 3 you should be open to change. 4 you should let go of control when necessary. 5 you should learn something new every day. 6 you should be helpful." How boring is that, right? I mean, what is this now? When we list these 6 items, yes, they're saying nice things, but it doesn't resonate with us. It doesn't resonate with us. We can't perceive it. It doesn't reach our subconscious. So no one would read this text, and if they listen to this person, they'd just listen without really caring. There wouldn't be any lasting change anyway. But when you convey this to the other person within a story, it gets through naturally. And within the story, the person lets themselves go. It just flows and flows. For example, now I'm going to explain these 6 items to you through the story of water. Look, I'll give you the same messages. The same messages will reach you, but they'll reach you within such a beautiful story. This is a story I tell in my seminars. So, for example, when you hear this one day in a seminar or a program, you'll perceive it more consciously now. Because my goal is not just to get up and tell people stories. That's not my aim. My aim is to create a transformation in people through stories and to convey certain messages. But as I just said, these messages shouldn't just be like, be flexible. Or, let yourself go with the flow when necessary, be patient. Not like that. We need to deliver them within a story like this. The story of water. Sufis say to each other, "Be as precious as water." This is a phrase that has always been used in our culture. Years ago, I started to pursue the meaning behind this saying. What does it mean to be as precious as water? Yes, we hear it. It's trying to tell us something from somewhere. But what does it really mean to be as precious as water? Anyway, I researched and I collected various stories from many parts of Turkey. And for the first time I realized that no encounter is a coincidence. I shared the story of water in my book. So, what was the story of water? This was the story of water. Let's examine a stream flowing down from a mountain. Now, everything in the universe teaches us a lesson, doesn't it? The Quran begins with the command to read. There is a message in everything. So water also gives us a very beautiful message. We just need to read it. In other words, look at it, examine it, and approach it with awareness. Now, let's approach the water. When we examine a stream flowing down from a mountain, we see that water always chooses the path of least resistance. What does it mean to choose the path of least resistance? For example, what if a rock appears in its path? Water doesn't bother with that rock. What does it do? It flows around the rock and continues on its way. That's always how water flows. Pay attention to this. It comes from here, goes from there, comes from here. Why? Because if something appears in its way, if it can pass through, it goes that way. It continues on its way by winding, moving flexibly. The Sufis say, never bother with the person who bothers you. If you do, you'll stay stuck in the same place as them. Take them, set them aside, and continue on your way. But sometimes we get stuck. We get stuck on people, we get stuck on events, we get stuck on something someone said to us. We carry it for days, months, sometimes even years. Why did they do this to me? Why did they say this to me? Why didn't I respond to them? We get stuck there, we can't move on, and the more we get stuck, the more it starts to harm us. Look, for example, I have a glass of water in my hand, right? All of us can lift this glass of water. We can hold it like this too. Let me move it a little further in my hand like this. But if I hold it like this for a minute, my hand starts to get tired. If I hold it for 3 minutes, my hand gets even more tired. If I hold it for 5 minutes, I won't be able to hold it anymore, and I'll spill it. 10 minutes is already very difficult. Maybe we can't even do it. Look, this water isn't heavy. It's my insistence on holding it that makes it heavy. This is exactly what we do to our minds. We can't move on. We can't leave it there. The more we carry it, the heavier it gets. It keeps getting heavier as we keep carrying it. Being flexible, flowing like water, not staying in the same place with it, water gives us the best message here. So the next time you climb a mountain and watch the path of the water, let it always remind you of this. Let it flow, let it wander. So we said be patient. Sometimes water cannot flow. Sometimes such a huge rock appears that there is no way around it. So what does water do then? Then the drops strike the rock again and again, patiently with patience, and what happens? Those delicate, slender drops of water pierce through the rock. It is not the strength of the water that pierces the rock. It's consistency. It is the patient flow of water over the rock that pierces it. This too is a form of patience. Patience in our culture is not just as it is often perceived, just be patient. It's not a mindset of just endure whatever happens to you. Patience, look, even Mevlana says this. He says patience is not submission, but struggle. Look, this is a completely different meaning. He says it is not submission, but struggle. Here, water shows us this as well. No matter how weak you may appear, as long as you persist with consistency, you will pierce even that huge, seemingly unbreakable rock. Look, even right now, water has given us 2 beautiful lessons. Another characteristic of water is that it knows when it needs to change. What does it mean that it knows when it needs to change? Look, sometimes water becomes vapor, sometimes it becomes rain. Sometimes it becomes ice, sometimes it becomes snow. It turns into vapor and rises. It ascends to the sky, then descends again to the earth as rain. Water knows that it needs to change according to circumstances and conditions when necessary. What does this tell us? It teaches us a very important lesson. Life is a constant flow. Life is a continuous change and cycle. It teaches us that we too need to change when the time comes, that we need to be able to change when necessary. It tells us that if we stay in the same place, we won't be able to flow, and if we stay in the same place, we won't be able to grow. Of course, everyone uses the word change. But to truly be able to change is to be able to step out of your comfort zone. We also hear the term comfort zone a lot, especially lately. What does it mean? I will explain this to you in a very simple way. How do we know if we've stepped out of our comfort zone? If, when you're experiencing something new, you find yourself wondering, what if you're afraid, if you're asking yourself, will I be able to do it or not, then you are stepping out of your comfort zone. Because if you're in your comfort zone, these questions don't even come up. Since you already know that place, these questions aren't asked. So that means, will I be able to do it? Will I be able to succeed? If thoughts like, what if I fail? I'm scared, or uncertainty come to your mind, don't be upset. On the contrary, tell yourself, that means I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. This is how you recognize that you've stepped out of your comfort zone. And to change is to step out of your comfort zone. At the same time, change when necessary, adapt to technology, adapt to new ideas. Don't be rigid. This is exactly where water beautifully teaches us that we need to change. Another characteristic of water is that water always wants to flow. It wants to flow because that's its nature. So what happens to water that can't flow? If you pay attention, sometimes puddles form along the banks of streams where water can't flow. It starts to get muddy, it starts to grow algae, insects begin to breed there, worms start to grow. But flowing water is clear. Flowing water is clean. That's what our elders say too. Yes, only flowing water is clear, only from there can you drink water. because when it flows, that water is drinkable. But for example, if you find stagnant water in the forest, you definitely need to do something to kill certain germs in it. But if that water is flowing like this, it means it shows its health. So what does it mean to flow? Mevlana says the following: how good it is to move from one place to another every day. How beautiful it is to settle in a new place every day. How delightful it is to flow without freezing, without becoming murky. Whatever belonged to yesterday stayed in yesterday. My dear, he says, today we must say new things. To flow means to learn something new every day. It means to add something to yourself every day. It means doing something you are afraid of. It means doing something that surprises you. For example, when was the last time you were surprised? If you haven't been surprised, if you haven't learned, if you haven't received new information, if you haven't faced your fears, then you are not able to flow. They say that someone who has reached the age of 30 has lived an average of 10,000 days. But the question is, did you live 10,000 different days, or did you live the same day over and over again? If every day is the same as the other, then in reality, you haven't lived 10,000 days, but just one day. Only count the days you learned something new as a new day. You should count the days you were surprised, the days you bravely faced something, as new days. Now take a moment to reflect. You should question yourself too. This is what it means to flow. We must always be in flow. We must always find ourselves within that flow. Our Prophet also has a saying like this. He says, whoever's 2 days are the same is at a loss. Look, whoever's 2 days are the same is at a loss. That means my today was no different from my yesterday. Let's move on to another characteristic of water. After doing everything it can, water lets itself go with the flow of the stream, because it knows that all streams eventually flow into seas and oceans. Yes, sometimes we choose our own paths at crossroads too, but if we try to control everything in life, we learn painful lessons. Let go of everything. You can't even control your own child's thoughts. We cannot control the outside world. We can only control the meaning we give to things, the content within. And the greatest mastery we can achieve is this. After controlling our own thoughts, to adjust our sails according to the wind outside. Because a sailor cannot control the wind outside, but he can adjust his sails accordingly. But trying to control it, this is where perfectionism comes in. You must always be perfect, be perfect. Underneath that lies a need for control. It suffocates you, it squeezes you. And in fact, maybe some of you have experienced this. You keep trying to control, keep trying to control. In the end, you realize that you can't control anything. The best thing you can do is to let go, to surrender. Of course, after you've done everything you can. Another characteristic of water is that it is water. It always nourishes. It nourishes people, it nourishes plants, it nourishes animals. Wherever there is water, there is life. Wherever there is life, there is water. Look, do a little historical research. Where have all civilizations been established? They have always been established near water. Wherever there is flowing water, clean water, there are living beings. There are living beings, there are birds, there are animals, there are plants, there are trees. Water has always nourished, water has always given. Because of all these characteristics I have mentioned, Sufis, they tell each other, be as precious as water. And I say to you, be as precious as water. Look, at the beginning I listed 6 items. Be flexible, be patient, and so on. How lifeless that was. How easily forgotten it was, something you'd forget as soon as you heard it. But when I explained it within the story of water, I was able to convey all the messages I wanted to give, and the topic flowed. And while you're explaining, by the way, let's say I do this, for example. I'm telling this to the 10,000th person. Every time I tell it, I enjoy it. That's also a part of the story. But with something plain, you get bored from telling it over and over again. Now the fine detail here is very important. I still gave the same messages. I said you should keep flowing. I talked about patience. Well, what else can I say? Ergin, I said you should learn something new. I said you should be giving, but this. I explained it within a very beautiful story. And when people hear this story from you, whenever they go to the seaside one day or sit by a stream, they will remember it every time. But listing things one by one is emotionless. They won't remember that. And every time they see a stream, they will remember that lesson. They will remember you. They will remember the way you told it, and the messages will have been conveyed naturally. This is the essence of storytelling. This is the deepest, the most beautiful, the most impactful part. Think about this for a bit. Now let's move on to the second part about storytelling. We will continue talking about storytelling again.